Okay, so we've already gone over the very basic definition of sustainability or sustain. So let's go over to look at some definitions that are of actual sustainability in the context that we'll use in this class. Okay, so here's the first one I put here. It's sustainability is meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Okay, so this is the Brundtland Commission definition. This is something you should know. So the Brundtland Commission, uh, there is, as I said, no single definition of sustainability out there, but this is the one that is most widely recognized, most widely known. So if someone is asked to define or what is the definition of sustainability, this is the one that's most commonly cited. So just an FYI, the Brundtland Commission was put together by the United Nations in the early 1980s, and so it was this global effort to address what was seen at the time as sustainability problems that had to do with global poverty, and at that time it was like ozone hole, acid rain, all this kind of stuff. So this definition was actually came from a book called Our Common Future. Um, that was written by the Brundtland Commission, and Brundtland is just the name of the person that was in charge of the commission. It was Gro Harlem Brundtland. Anyway, if you hear the term Brundtland Commission, it's referring generally to this definition of sustainability. So this is something that I do want you to know. So I want you to also think about this definition itself and think about some of the good and or bad things about it. And I also want you to think in particular, if you think it's a decent definition, how would you actually apply this? So if you really wanted to apply this to changing our ways, so to speak, to establish sustainability, like is it feasible? Are there some issues with doing it? Okay, so you can go ahead and press pause and think about it. So some commonly cited issues, both good and bad with this issue. The good one is that it considers future generations. Okay, so this is something that it seems kind of obvious probably to you, but at the time, this was the first time it was really formalized that we should think about future generations while we're dealing with sustainability. To that point, it mostly had to do with environmental issues and like how do we solve these environmental problems, but actually formalizing and saying, look, we need to figure out how we can have current people do okay, but also think about what the impacts on future generations. That's a really important part of the definition. Another kind of interesting thing about its application is that it's good in a way because it doesn't really explicitly lay out exactly what you have to do. Now that's a drawback, but it can be good because it can be reconfigured to fit situations sort of now in the future. So 50 years from now, we don't know what the world's going to look like, but 50 years from now, we can still apply this definition and say, okay, we need to take care of the generations now, but also think about generations down the line. So it is vague enough that it can be applied and sort of um, it can be massaged to fit exactly what's going on at the time it's used. So one of the really big problems with this definition, and this is again commonly cited by people, is you notice this term needs, meaning present needs and future needs. But the question is what is a need? And so you can think about that. And what people usually say, okay, what do we need? We're humans. We need food, water, and shelter, right? So we need that to survive. But really, is that enough to live a life that you really want to live? Is it constitute a high quality of life? Is there anything else that you need? And you think about some of the things that practically you need at this point in time. I mean, depending on who you are, where you live, and so forth. But in the US, in particular, most jobs, if you're in school like you are right now, a cell phone, you kind of need a cell phone. You don't necessarily need one. A computer, I mean, for this class, you actually need a computer. Now, you don't need to own one, but you need to have access to one, okay, to get through this class. What about a car? I'm narrating this from the state of Delaware, which is very much car-centric place. Public transportation is not all that great, so I kind of need a car. I don't technically, quote unquote, need it, but it'd be really hard to get by without a car where I live. Do you need personal relationships? Is that important? For most people, they probably say, yeah, what about clean air, water, soil? What about money? Is that a need? How much money is necessary? So again, the whole point here, there's many more questions that could be asked. But the key here is that this term need is actually a lot more problematic than you might realize at first blush when you really dig into it. It's like, what do you actually need, and is just meeting needs enough? Okay, and also, I mean, is the environment, usually when people think about sustainability, they think about the environment. But the environment is not explicitly mentioned in the definition. Now you could say that it's implied because people can't meet their needs without having a reasonably clean and sustained environment. So it is implied, but it's not direct. So again, it's kind of messy. So one of the points here is that sustainability is a really messy topic. Even what's considered widely considered a very good definition has some problems associated with it. And this is going to pop up again and again as we go through the content this semester. Sustainability is very messy, but the key here is that the more you learn about it, the more you understand, the better you can think about sustainability, the better you can apply some of these definitions. Okay, so this is the main definition here, but here's just, I'm going to run through a few others, and I'm not really going to harp on them, but improving the quality of human life within the carrying capacity of supporting ecosystem, create and maintain conditions under which humans and nature can exist in productive harmony to support present and future generations, develop and improves the long-term health of human and ecological system, any form of positive change which does not erode the ecological, social, or political systems. So these are all really good definitions. I'm not saying one is better than the other. They all address sustainability in a different way. You notice these other definitions more explicitly mention in nature, so ecosystems, humans and nature. We have, this one's interesting because it actually says improving the long-term health. So not only do we need to maintain, but improve, and that's actually kind of a movement that's sort of occurring, that we need to figure out ways that we can actually improve the conditions that we currently live in. So again, the main point here is that there's no one single definition of sustainability, and there's a lot of different ways to think about it. But as we go throughout the course, hopefully you'll learn more and more about it and be able to think more deeply and intellectually about it. But one thing I do want to bring up as you read through these definitions, do you notice something here in all of these definitions that's not mentioned at all? That is probably something you think about pretty frequently and probably at least once a day. So I'll put these definitions back up there. So there's something here that's missing that you probably think about all the time, and that society, human society in general, thinks about a lot and focuses on a lot. And money. I mean, it's not actually mentioned in here in any of these definitions. And so it's interesting, I think, that as we talk about sustainability, it's very rare that people actually mention money. Or at least we need money for its own sake. Money, it can be good or bad for sustainability. I mean, money is important. I mean, it's just a fact that it's very, very hard to get by without at least a reasonable amount of money, because money can get you things that can help establish a high quality of life, that can help you, live the life that you want to lead. And so money is really, really important, and I'm recognizing that. But what I think is also important to understand is that money itself isn't really directly, it's not actually required for sustainability. Sustainability is more, can we sustain what we're doing for, moving forward? And so money may hurt or help that. So I want you to think, just keep that in mind, that money is important, but that it can actually have a positive or negative impact on sustainability, and we'll get to that in more detail later. Okay, so there is no single definition of sustainability, but there are a lot of relevant definitions, and they're helpful in terms of thinking about sustainability. But one framework that we're going to use, and this is really commonly used in the sustainability field, is something called the 3E framework. So the 3 E's of sustainability. The first E is environment, okay? So E, environment. So you can think about environment, clean air, clean, arable land, biodiversity, clean, environment. We all kind of understand intuitively. So that's your first E. Second E is economy. Now, I don't want you to think of this just as money. I want you to think about it in terms of what money can do for people. So economic sort of considerations, availability of jobs, of decent work, of having enough money to have a decent quality of life, having reasonable pay, decent living standards, and so forth. So when we think about economy in terms of sustainability, I don't want you to just think about making money, making the most money you possibly can. And in fact, that gets us into trouble. I want you to think about money in terms of what it does for people. And the other E, the one that's not thought of quite as often, is something called social equity. And equity, and we'll get into a lot more detail later, equity means it's not equality, so it's not assuming that everybody should have the same of everything, like everyone should make the same income and have the same everything. It's the notion of equity is does everyone have reasonable access to things that promote a high quality of life? So do you have, does it matter if you're low income or wealthy, do you have access to health care, a decent job, do you have political power, do you have a clean neighborhood, so forth. Okay, so social equity is the belief that everyone should have reasonable access to things that promote a high quality of life. So what I want you to think about sustainability, and we'll do this throughout the semester, is sustainability kind of lies at the intersection of these three E's. And so if something is sustainable, if you want to think about whether or not something is sustainable, you want to ask yourself, does that thing promote all three aspects of sustainability now and in the future everywhere? So I want you to think this in a very holistic way. If you're analyzing whether or not something is sustainable, I want you to think about how does it impact the environment? How does it impact the economy in terms of how the economy impacts people? And also, does it promote social equity? Okay, so if you can say yes to all those three things, then it's probably sustainable. Again, very messy, and it's not easy to necessarily think in these terms, but it's a really good way to frame out sustainability and think about it. And so we will apply that throughout the semester. And so this is your 3E framework, very well known in the sustainability field. And I'm not going to go through these all again, but these are the examples that we had the previous discussion. So he wants you to think about applying the 3 E's to all these topics. So the building of neighborhoods and fire zones, the development of suburban sprawl, this growing inequality. So you can think about all those things, not just in terms of can you sustain them moving forward, but how do they each address the 3 E's. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this first set of lectures. And so what I wanted to leave you with is some questions that we'll explore throughout the semester. Okay. So should the government play a role in the economy? Very big question. Is economic growth always good? This is something you hear about all the time. We'll discuss, is it always good? Why are so many African countries poor? It's an objective truth that a lot of African countries are relatively low income, and we'll kind of dig into some of the reasons, again, from a sustainability perspective. Does everyone in the U.S. have equal rights? This is a social equity, social justice issue we'll talk about. Does more money equal more happiness? A really big one here. Is climate change being caused by humans? Are we running out of water? Is recycling important? What does farming have to do with deadly bacteria? And is there hope for the future? So all of these are questions, some bigger than others, that we will address, and many, many more. So I want you to leave you with the thought that the things that we're going to discuss in this class are relevant, are applicable beyond the class itself, and I will encourage you to apply the concepts beyond the class as much as possible. And I will leave you with this quote, and I think this is very relevant to the class. To every complex question, there's a simple answer, and it is wrong. And we're going to find that again and again throughout the semester, that there is no simple answers to a lot of these sustainability questions, but the more you know, the more you learn, the better equipped you will be to find the right answers.